Hello, friends. Let's talk about being the best version of ourselves. So, when was the last time you felt like your best self? Do you remember? How can you recreate that version of you? Better yet, how can you sustain that version of yourself and tap into it more often? When we think about our potential, we tend to look at what other people are doing. And when we look outside of ourselves, we begin the comparison game. But another great way to think about who we want to be is to pay attention to the moments when we show up as our very best self. That's why I love to keep a list of accomplishments. That list is proof. It's documentation of all the times that I showed up as the best version of me and all the times that I stepped up and impressed myself. None of us are at 100% all the time. Sometimes we show up as our best self and sometimes we don't. Unfortunately, we have a negativity bias and we have a tendency for self-criticism. So when we think about ourselves as a whole, we tend to overemphasize the parts that are not so great. Keeping records of the times when we are at our best is a great source of inspiration. But this is a different kind of inspiration. It doesn't focus on the gap between us and some celebrity or some random person on the internet. This is inspiration that focuses on things that we already know we can do because we've done them. This kind of inspiration is a reinforcement of the part of you that you would like to enhance. So how can you make the most of what you know you are capable of? Well, first, start by identifying examples where you embodied your best self. When was the last time you showed up in a way that made you feel really proud of yourself? When did you rise to the occasion? You may not even recognize all the times that you do something exceptional. We often assume that what comes naturally to us must also be easy for other people, but that's not always the case. So when was the last time you received positive feedback or praise for something you did really well? What was it about you that was outstanding in that situation? Was it a particular behavior? Was it something you said or something you did? Was it how you said it or how you did it? Try to pinpoint the behavior or characteristic that made you stand out in that situation. Thinking back to past examples is a great place to start. But the good news is that your best self will show up again in the future. So train yourself to pay attention, and when she or he shows up, take note of it. Try to recognize your best self when it shows up for you. So the first step is to recognize your best self. The second step is to nurture your best self. And you do this by creating the conditions necessary for it to show up. We tend to show up as our best selves when our environment and circumstances support us. Think about how hard it is to make a meaningful contribution or be productive when you haven't had enough sleep or you're not feeling well or you're going through some personal drama. The conditions are just not there. So as you think about times when you felt like you were at your best, try to identify the factors that existed for you back then. You may even find that the conditions seem unrelated at first, but as you look into it further, you realize that they created the right circumstances for you to thrive. For example, maybe you achieved something amazing in your professional life at a time where you also happen to prioritize rest and exercise. Maybe your personal life was thriving when you had a great manager who respected your boundaries around work. Or maybe you did really well financially when you hung out with a particular group of people. Try to remember the conditions surrounding your best self. What habits did you have at that time? What activities did you engage in outside of work? Who did you hang out with? How did you feel about yourself at that time? And what was your overall attitude toward life? Were you confident, hopeful, optimistic? Were you inspired and motivated? How did you feel back then? And now take a look at where you are today. If you find that your life has drifted away from the conditions that brought out the best in you, how can you start to bridge the gap? Now, of course, everything doesn't have to be a one-to-one match. But as much as you can, try to mirror those optimal conditions. Maybe one of those conditions was that you were very active in the past. Maybe you used to run a lot, but then you suffered a knee injury, so running is not in the cards for you right now. But the point is not to run, the point is to be active. So maybe you take up swimming or cycling instead. Matching the exact activity matters less than recreating the impact it had on you. So if what you need to thrive is to be more active, feel more confident, find new inspiration, or have a supportive social group, you can find multiple ways to achieve the same impact. The key here is that when you identify the conditions and factors that bring out the best in you, you can then strategize on how to make these a more permanent or long-lasting part of your life. Now, a couple of caveats before we end this video. Number one is that being your best is not always the goal. Realistically, none of us can operate at our very best all the time. And there are many situations where that should not be the goal. When we're dealing with traumatic experiences, sickness, or tragedy, our goal may be to overcome, survive, and heal. There are trying times in our lives where being our best is not the goal. But in our day-to-day, ordinary lives, when things are okay, that can be a great time to curate our activities, our habits, and our environment to support us in the best way possible. The second caveat is try not to embellish your past. It's really easy to start thinking about the good old days and look back with rose-colored glasses. We are not trying to go back in time to relive an imperfect past. We are simply trying to draw inspiration from who we have proven we can be. So if you feel like you're not quite where you want to be, or you're not quite living up to your potential, draw some inspiration from yourself and think about ways that you can create the right environment, the right conditions to support the very best version of you. And if you've enjoyed this video, I think you'll like the one where I talk about creating a stronger relationship with ourselves. I'll link to it on this screen and in the description box below. Please take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.